What if the fire wasn't an accident? What if it was a reckoning, centuries in the making? 9 powerful men entered a cellar beneath a southern mansion and never came out. The slave quarters burned to the ground, yet not a single enslaved person was harmed. No one spoke. No one confessed. So why did the county erase every last trace? Was it vengeance, a curse, or something far older than either? This is the night history tried to forget and the fire that refused to die. This is the story of the Forgotten Cell, Mississippi, October 1861. The field stretched wide and white beneath a brittle sun, cotton bursting from its husks like silent screams. The hawthorn plantation stood in imposing stillness at the heart of this expanse, its wooden bones darkened with time, its windows gazing blankly toward the hills like eyes too weary to weep. It was one of the oldest estates in the region, established generations earlier by Augustus Hawthorne's grandfather, a veteran of the American Revolution, and a man remembered more for his cruelty than his medals. Now under Augustus's control, the plantation had only grown in wealth and infamy. Its yield was bountiful, but its punishments were legendary. The slave quarters, known simply as the row, were tucked behind the barns, out of sight of the main house. These structures were not homes, but cages, thin-walled shacks with dirt floors and tin roofs that clicked and whispered when the wind passed over. They housed more than 50 souls, their lives woven into the endless rhythm of labor, silence, and fear. By law, they were not people. By custom, they were not heard. But lately, strange murmurs had begun among them. Fragments of songs never sung aloud, warnings etched into wood, stones placed deliberately in circular patterns behind the cookhouse. An unsettling unease had settled over the nights, thick and slow. Eliza, a girl of 17, noticed the changes first. She often awoke with the scent of smoke in her nostrils and the taste of iron in her mouth. Mariah, the oldest among them, whispered to her that the spirits had grown restless. "Not ghosts, child," she said, her voice soft and papery. "Memory. Memory never stays buried." The master of the house, Augustus, was unaware, or chose to be. His concerns were elsewhere. He had begun hosting visitors from neighboring counties, inviting them for long dinners, late nights, and private discussions in the cellar beneath the great house. These men were landowners, politicians, clergy, the respected pillars of the community. They came with fine coats and darker intentions. It was rumored among the servants that they gathered around an old map, tracing lines and murmuring in a foreign tongue. A ledger, found once and swiftly hidden again, recorded something more than crop sales. It tracked blood. The overseer, a gaunt man named Fitch, enforced order with a brutal hand and a loaded pistol. Yet even he seemed unnerved of late, spitting over his shoulder when he passed the row and muttering prayers as he lit his pipe. Something unseen was gathering there, between the creaking trees and the damp earth. In the silence that followed, the whip, Eliza found herself standing awake for hours, staring into the night, certain that something moved just beyond her vision, something watching. She felt a cold dread settle in her bones, a primal fear that had nothing to do with the master and everything to do with the coming storm. On the night of October 10th, a Bichagos red handprint appeared on the door of the cookhouse. No one admitted to placing it there, and no one dared try to remove it. The next morning, 3 crows were found dead on the front porch of the great house, their wings spread unnaturally, their eyes missing. Augustus ordered their burial, but that night the cook swore she saw them still perched on the chimney in the moonlight. 2 days later, 9 invitations were sent to the most powerful men in the region. A private dinner, an opportunity, the letter said, to affirm the bonds of dominion and protect what is rightly ours. The guests accepted without hesitation. In the quarters, silence deepened. Mariah began drawing lines in ash around the sleeping areas, murmuring in a tongue older than English, older than the land itself. The air grew thick with a sense of impending doom, a premonition that something was about to give way, and when it did, the past would finally come to collect its debt. Eliza followed her once into the woods behind the cane field, where a small clearing had been swept clean, and 7 stones, stood in a broken circle. In the center lay a small scorched doll made of straw and black thread. Maria knelt, placed her hand upon the earth, and whispered, "Let them feel what we have carried." When Eliza asked what it meant, Maria only said, "The fire listens, and the fire remembers." 2 nights later, the dinner would begin. The fire would come, and nothing, not a single thing, would ever be the same. October 12th, 1861. The sky above Lafayette County was heavy with a haze that clung to the trees like a silent, unspoken warning. That evening, the air turned unnaturally still. There was no wind, no bird song, only the low groan of wood settling beneath the weight of years. The house was dressed for the occasion, candlelight glowing in each window, silver polished, the parlor scented with rosemary and burnt sugar. Servants moved like shadows between the rooms, setting fine china and pouring dark wine into crystal flutes. At precisely 7, the first carriage arrived. By 8, all 9 guests had entered the house. Their names would later be redacted or lost, stripped from county records, censored in whispers, but in that moment, they were celebrated. They were men of stature, wealth, and land, a judge, 2 bankers, several prominent planters, a retired army officer, a preacher whose sermons were known for their fire and fury. All of them were white, all of them were powerful, and all of them were deeply implicated in the cruel machinery that ran beneath the soil and cotton of the South. They dined with Augustus Hawthorne at the long walnut table beneath a chandelier carved in France. They ate roasted pheasant, smoked pork, and corn pudding, and drank wine imported from Spain. The conversation was stiff at first, centered on the weather, crop yields, and Union troop movements. But soon it thickened. They spoke of property, not land, but people. Numbers were exchanged. Tales of punishment were told like parables. One man recounted how he branded a runaway across the chest to mark them as a warning to others. Another described the construction of a discipline pit. Laughter followed, low and satisfied. The air filled with a sound so ugly it seemed to poison the very light of the candles. Augustus remained mostly quiet, listening and observing. At the head of the table, he looked thinner than usual, his eyes darker, more distant. When dessert was served, he raised a glass and made a peculiar toast to the preservation of order, of bloodlines, of legacy. The others drank without hesitation, and then, without being asked, they all rose and moved toward the cellar door. It was an unspoken ritual. They had done this before, though never all together. Below the main floor, behind a locked iron grate, and past a hallway lined with books and sealed cabinets, was the gathering room. It was a low-ceilinged chamber of stone lit only by lanterns and a central hearth that had not held a flame in months. The air was damp. The walls bore carvings, not found in any church, symbols etched in chalk and soot, interlocking circles and strange alphabets. The 9 men stood in a ring, each positioned before a candle, each bearing a small object: a coin, a bone, a feather, a lock of hair. Augustus produced from his coat a small book wrapped in black leather. He opened it without ceremony. The language inside was not English, not Latin. The words crawled from his mouth as if dredged from the bottom of the earth, syllables that made the skin prickle and the candle flames shudder. One man, the youngest of the group, hesitated, asking if this was truly necessary. Augustus looked at him, and for the first time that night, a peculiar smile touched his lips. "You do not bind a kingdom with prayers," he said. "You bind it with debt and fire." Above them the house creaked. In the kitchen, Eliza paused. The wind had returned, sliding under doors and through floorboards, carrying the faint scent of ash. She stepped outside and saw Maria standing near the edge of the woods, her eyes closed, her lips moving silently. Back in the cellar, the ritual continued. The book, as it always did at the end of the invocation, burned. But this time the flame refused to die. It danced higher, licking the stone walls, hissing. The hearth cracked. The floor beneath them seemed to pulse, as if something buried deep was stirring. Augustus stumbled, coughing, his eyes watering. The others drew back, but the doorway had vanished. The iron grate would not open. Upstairs, the servants vanished from sight. Doors clicked shut one by one. In the quarters, the enslaved stood awake and silent, watching the dark horizon. Eliza turned to Mariah and whispered, "It's begun." And Mariah nodded once. It was never going to be a dinner. Below the earth, 9 men began to understand what had come for them. It began at precisely 3:03 in the morning. A sudden gust, unnatural in its force, rushed through the rows of slave quarters, scattering ash and straw like frightened birds. No alarm was raised. No dogs barked. But the air shifted, thickening with the heat, and something older, something buried beneath the very roots of the plantation, began to rise. Eliza was the first to see the light, a flicker at the base of the row, just beneath the floorboards of the middle shack. Not flame yet, just a pulsing glow. She stepped outside, barefoot on the cold earth, and stared. One by one, others joined her. Men, women, and children emerged silently from their cabins, drawn by the same pull. No one spoke. No one ran. The light grew. Within seconds, fire exploded upward as if summoned by a breath. It didn't creep from spark to spark or grow by the whim of the wind. It ignited all at once. The entire row of quarters caught fire in a single breath. Walls cracked, roofs heaved, and a column of black smoke twisted into the sky, but no screams came from within because no one was inside. Not a single enslaved person remained in the burning structures. They stood outside, barefoot in the grass, watching. From the main house, chaos erupted. Servants pounded on doors. The overseer, Fitch, tried to rally the guards, shouting orders that were lost to the roar of the flames. But when he reached for his pistol, it misfired. When he tried to open the cellar door to summon Augustus and his guests, he found the locks warped, the hinges blistering hot. No response came from within. Only a pounding, muffled, frantic, rhythmic, 9 fists, 9 sets of screams. The fire leapt unnaturally, striking not toward the main house but inward, circling the row, trapping the cellar door in a ring of heat. The wood blackened and cracked, the metal curled. Inside the cellar, the men pounded harder. Smoke slithered through the seams. Their eyes watered, their lungs burned. Someone screamed that they were cursed. Another sobbed for forgiveness, but the door would not open. The stone walls trembled. One of the house servants, a boy no older than 10, said later that he saw a figure standing at the edge of the flames. A woman, tall, wrapped in white cloth, her eyes glowing like coals. She raised her hand and the fire bent toward the cellar. It was then they knew. It wasn't a punishment from God they faced, but a debt long overdue, paid in full and delivered by the memory of the land itself. The boy never spoke again after that night. At 3:47 a.m., the fire reached its peak. The sky turned red. The ground trembled. The flames coiled into the sky, then fell still, as if inhaling. A moment of silence stretched impossibly long, and then everything went dark. Not slowly, not fading. The fire vanished as if it had been swallowed whole. Only smoke remained, thick and bitter. The cellar door now hung open. No one had touched it. Inside, the room was scorched black. The floor was cracked open in a jagged circle. Around it, 9 bodies, or what was left of them, lay slumped or twisted, each in a different position. One had scratched at the stone until his fingers bled. Another had clawed at his own throat. They had died not of fire or smoke, but of something else, something unseen, something they had tried to bind and failed. At the center of the room, untouched by flame or soot, lay the remains of the black leather book. It had returned. Its pages were unburned, open to a single symbol drawn in red like blood, a spiral inside a spiral. By dawn, the smoke had cleared. The quarters were reduced to ash. The bodies of the enslaved were accounted for, unharmed, untouched, and silent. Mariah stood at the edge of the ruin holding Eliza's hand. She spoke no words, but in her other hand she held something small and blackened, a piece of iron shaped like a key. and above them, the sky remained red long after the sun had risen. By mid-morning, word had reached the nearest town, an urgent. Ryder, pale and breathless, bore the news that Hawthorne Plantation had burned. Sheriff Luther Graves arrived just before noon, flanked by 2 deputies and a preacher. They expected chaos, riots, death in the fields, but what they found was silence, utter, deafening silence. The slave quarters were gone, nothing but a field of ash and half-melted nails scattered like bones in the dust. The main house still stood, its facade blackened with soot, its windows dark. Smoke lingered in the air like a scent that refused to dissipate. The sheriff was led to the cellar by a servant who spoke no words. There, he saw the aftermath. 9 corpses arranged around a blackened circle in the stone floor. Each one bore a different expression: terror, rage, disbelief, and, in one case, what looked like pleading. The stone beneath them was cracked, burned into a spiral pattern, the center hollow as if something had been pulled down into the earth. The sheriff ordered the cellar sealed immediately. Deputies tried to record the scene, but their ink ran thin, their sketches smeared, and the chalk outlines refused to hold their shape. The preacher vomited twice before stumbling from the room, whispering verses that didn't match any scripture. When asked what had happened, the remaining household staff only shrugged. Their eyes were blank. Some wept quietly. Others just stared past the men as if something still stood behind them. A formal inquiry was convened within 3 days, but the process quickly fell apart. The original fire reports vanished. The coroner resigned after examining the remains. One of the deputies took his own life after claiming he heard voices under his floorboards at night, voices calling him by name. The judge recused himself, citing moral confusion. No charges were brought, no suspects were named. The conclusion, hastily written and signed, described the fire as a freak act of God, but the sheriff knew better. This wasn't an act of God. It was an act of vengeance so profound it had left a scar on the land itself. Among the townspeople, the story spread, not from newspapers but over fences, across dinner tables, whispered behind gloved hands in church pews. They said the fire hadn't destroyed the house. It had tried to consume something beneath it. They said the enslaved had been warned by dreams, by ghosts, by ancestors. Some claimed to have seen shapes in the smoke, tall figures with burning eyes. Others said they saw the 9 guests walking through the cotton fields days after their bodies were buried. The land was sold off in parcels. The Hawthorne name was stricken from the deed. New settlers came, unaware or uninterested in the past. But they did not stay long. Tools vanished. Fires refused to burn. Children spoke to invisible friends. Animals refused to cross certain corners of the property. And then there were the nights when the air itself would hum and steady, a vibration that passed through windows and bones until sleep became impossible. One woman, a schoolteacher from Ohio, moved into a cottage built on the edge of the former quarters. She lasted 2 weeks. On her final night, she wrote in her journal, "They come at 3:03. I hear them below me, walking in circles, 9 of them, always 9. Local legends blossomed like wild fungi, each variation more elaborate, more haunting. Some said the fire wasn't fire at all, but judgment made manifest. Others believed the book found in the cellar was still somewhere on the property, cursed, to return to whoever tried to destroy it. A few claimed it was never a book, but a door, and that the door had opened. The town council eventually ordered the land fenced off. A weathered sign reads, "Private property, no trespassing." But even decades later, children dare each other to touch the gate, to walk the perimeter at night. Some return wide-eyed, silent for days. Others don't return at all. Back in the county archives, someone once tried to find the original deed for Hawthorne Plantation. The folder existed, but it was empty. No documents, no maps, just a scrap of parchment wedged in the corner with a single phrase in old handwriting: "The debt was collected, the door remains." The land where Hawthorne Plantation once stood is quiet now, overgrown, claimed by weeds and vines. The earth has swallowed the ruins like a grave that was never meant to be marked. Trees lean where the quarters once stood like ribs. The cellar, once sealed with concrete and iron, was unearthed decades later during an unauthorized excavation. What they found beneath it, or claimed to, was never officially recorded. The entrance was covered again within days. The research team left town without holding a single press conference. Their equipment was sold at auction. Their names were redacted. Yet, the questions remain. What truly happened on the night the quarters burned? Was it rebellion, meticulously planned and executed with terrifying precision? Was it justice, long overdue and finally delivered? Or was it something else entirely, something that existed, outside the boundaries of history, of logic, of flesh? Historians have picked apart the fragments for generations, a fire that consumed an entire row of buildings in under an hour, leaving no injuries but 9 inexplicable deaths in a room untouched by natural flame. The leather book, presumed destroyed in the cellar, was later rumored to have surfaced in a private collection in Charleston, then in Prague, then vanished. Photos taken near the site in 1943 revealed blurs of light, 9 distinct flares that appeared only in infrared exposures. The negatives were confiscated. A geologist investigating tremors beneath the old plantation grounds reported a network of hollow chambers in the bedrock that didn't appear on any survey. He left the field after that and became a minister. But the most chilling details come, not from books or maps, but from people, those descended from the enslaved and from the townspeople who remained. They speak of dreams that come only in October, of knocking heard beneath floorboards, of voices whispering the same words. Remember what they did. Remember who watched. Children are born with spirals on their palms. A preacher's daughter speaks, in dead tongues when the wind blows from the east. Once a year on the night of October 12th, a gathering still occurs, quiet, respectful, lit only by lanterns and candles. It's not advertised. No signs are posted. Those who come by memory or blood. They place stones in a circle. They pour water into the earth. They do not speak of fire. They do not speak of names. But some say when the wind passes just right, you can hear 9 men crying beneath the soil and something else listening. The official records end with ambiguity. No photographs of the victims remain. No formal declarations of wrongdoing. Yet, in the corner of an old sheriff's ledger, barely legible beneath layers of ink and age, is one final note. They did not die in the fire. The fire was what freed them from it. The legacy of that night lingers not in books but in absences, in what's missing from archives, in the stories that refuse to stay buried. It endures in the silences between breaths, in the way some refuse to walk certain roads, in the way the sun seems to linger longer over that field, as if reluctant to leave it in darkness. Was it vengeance? A curse? A crack in time where justice slipped through? No one knows. But if you stand there at night, just after the last light has gone, you might feel the warmth rise beneath your feet. And if you listen closely, you might hear the door creak open.